All women are different, but they are all women. This video is androcentric from a men's point of view and is presented as opinion, commentary, and debate. Expressing opinions is not violence. These are ideas to challenge, question, and argue in public, because classical liberalism relies on the First Amendment for its dialectic. If you are a feminist, then consider this. If patriarchy truly existed as claimed, feminism could not. And if all men are trash and women are equal to men, then what are we to conclude? Women will die for their children. Men will die for their wives and children. And God chose to die for all mankind. Authority rolls up with responsibility. If this framing of facts offends you, click off to a cute cat video. Proceeding further will expose you to gamma bias and criticism directed at ideas, claims, institutions, not at any individual's virtue or dignity. Our method follows the 7 liberal arts: the trivium, grammar, logic, rhetoric, and the quadrivium, arithmetic, geometry, music, and astronomy, and the transcendentals, the good, true, and beautiful. If this framework is not for you, feel free to exit now. It's no disgrace. Women are wonderful. God bless America. Men are great. Feminismus delendis est. Leftist Insanity, Purity Spirals, Narcissism of Small Differences, and Rejection of Reality, written by Conrad Riker, available now. Links in description. Red Pill Philosophy, a field guide for men who still notice reality. I walked in 12 minutes late with a bottle of wine and a subway signal failure on the F line. That is a fact. The train sat dead between stations. I sat inside it. I texted her. Facts, mechanical, boring, nobody's fault. But Dr. Winona had already been composing her verdict for 3 hours, surrounded by feminist colleagues in her curated apartment like priestesses at an altar of grievance. My explanation landed like a stone thrown into a cathedral of feelings. I had not arrived late. I had arrived disobediently. Your tardiness has vulnerated the emotional safety of this space, she announced. And every head turned. Not a request for explanation, an indictment. The wine I brought was recoded from a gift into a bribe, my factual account of a signal failure into epistemic violence, my 12 minutes into an unnamably deep wound to her sovereign ego. She did not ask what happened. She told me what I meant, and what I meant, apparently, was that I hate her labor, dismiss her worth, and enforce patriarchal time structure through the medium of municipal transit delays. The sneb was not her feeling rejected. I was not rejecting her, but her necessity to be rejected, so that the ritual could begin. Then came the demand, dressed in the language of healing. Because I had caused harm, I now owed her and her circle a restorative justice vacation. Not a conversation, not a clarification. A vacation purchased, packaged, and delivered as reparations for a subway signal. My tardiness had been converted into a debt, my exhaustion into pathology, my refusal to kneel into toxic masculinity refusing to hold space. Care language drawn like a blade. Holding space meant total submission. Safety meant her unquestioned authority. Accountability meant my wallet and my silence. I stood there holding the bottle, watching a mechanical delay transubstantiate into moral crime through the alchemy of ideological possession. She demanded equality of status while extracting unequal tribute. She rejected patriarchal transactionalism. While running the most ruthless transactional economy I had ever witnessed, her feelings minted the currency. My compliance purchased the absolution. And the exchange rate was always rigged. In her memory, the subway would cease to exist. I chose to be late. The signal failure would vanish like a heretic's testimony, edited out of the sacred narrative of her suffering. And here is where the trap closes. Every instinct says, apologize, smooth it over, buy peace. But an apology here is not repentance, it is a rope. It becomes the confession they quote tomorrow, the precedent they cite next week, the evidence that yes, he did violate her, he admitted it. The subway was a lie, the feeling was the fact. I set the wine on the counter, looked at her calmly and said, the signal failed. I texted you. I don't apologize for a train. The room went silent. The liturgy had hit a wall it could not consume, a man who would not feed his soul into their manufactories of guilt. The pattern in one page. Scene. Dr. Winona, a tenure-track Marxist feminist, invites her partner, a pragmatic structural engineer named Mark, to her intersectional care work dinner party. Mark arrives 12 minutes late due to a subway signal failure, bringing a bottle of wine he bought on the way. Winona has spent 3 hours curating a specific aesthetic of vulnerable authority and has already begun the ritualistic shaming of the patriarchal time structure in her head. When Mark enters, he does not immediately kneel to validate her labor. He offers the wine and a factual explanation of the delay. Winona interprets this factual correction as an act of epistemic violence, a sneb of dismissal. She then announces that because he was late, he has vulnerated the emotional safety of the room, and therefore he must now fund a restorative justice vacation for her and her female colleagues, effectively converting his tardiness into a debt of care. She frames his subsequent exhaustion as toxic masculinity refusing to hold space for her emotional labor. Erlebnis. For Dr. Winona, the clock is not a measurement of time, but a measure of her worth. The 12-minute delay is not a logistical error. It is an unnamably deep wound to her ego, a vulnerate to her sovereign status. She experiences the delay not as an event, but as a sneb, a sharp, dismissive rejection of her importance. Her feeling becomes fact because she felt slighted. Mark was slighting.
The wine is not a gift. It is a bribe to silence her justified rage. The care she demands is not mutual. It is an extraction of resources, money, attention, status to repair the injury of his autonomy.
She is the victim of his bad boy indifference, and her red pill realization is that men only respect power, so she must weaponize her fragility to force him into submission. Contradiction. Winona demands equality in status, but inequality in labor and resource allocation. She claims to reject patriarchal transactionalism while engaging in a highly transactional emotional economy, where her feelings dictate the terms of reality, and Mark's compliance is purchased through his guilt. She asserts her truth that she was wronged while refusing to apologize for the distortion of facts, the actual cause of the delay. Care ethic error. Winona uses care language to evade accountability. She claims to be holding space for the group's emotional needs, but this is a cover for her demand that Mark center her feelings above all else. Her care is conditional on his compliance. If he defends himself, he is not caring. She uses the moral high ground of emotional labor to justify her refusal to engage in logical discourse, effectively canceling justice with sentiment. Socratic question. If your feeling that you were slighted is the only proof that you were slighted, then how can you ever be wrong? And how can you ever learn? Dr. Winona's Erlebnis memory. I had spent 3 hours curating the space. I want you to understand that, not just cooking. I had made the caponata from scratch, the way my grandmother's grandmother made it, which is itself an act of cultural memory that patriarchy wants to erase, because women's food labor is invisible labor. And invisible labor is the foundation of every civilization that has ever existed. I had arranged the seating according to what I call intersectional flow, making sure that Dr. Asha, who carries the dual burden of being a woman of color and a single mother by choice, was positioned at the center, where her voice could radiate outward without being intercepted by anyone with unchecked privilege. I had candles. I had a playlist. I had held space for this evening for weeks. And he walked in 12 minutes late. Now, I know what some people will say. They'll say, Winona, it was 12 minutes. They'll say the subway was delayed. And I want to be clear, I hear that. I hold space for the fact that Mark experiences time differently than I do, that patriarchal time structure has trained him to believe that his arrival is the event around which all other events orbit. But I need you to understand something. I felt it. The moment 7 o'clock passed and he was not there, I felt something unnamably terrible open inside me. It was like a wound that had been waiting to be reopened. And I have learned, through therapy, through my work, through the wisdom of my community, that my feelings are data, my body knows things my conscious mind has not yet articulated. And my body was telling me, this man does not value you. When he walked in 12 minutes late, let us never forget the number, because numbers matter. unless they're being used by patriarchal systems to discipline female emotional flow. In which case numbers are violence. He was holding a bottle of wine, a Malbec, which if you know anything about wine, you know that Malbec is the most aggressively masculine wine. It is dense, it is heavy. It demands attention. It was not a gift, it was a message. It said, I will occupy your space on my terms, and here is a heavy red liquid to prove it. And do you know what he said? He said, and I am quoting directly because the language itself is the evidence. He said, sorry, subway signal failure at Broadway Lafayette. Brought some wine. That was it. No acknowledgement of the labor. No kneeling, and I mean that metaphorically, although honestly at this point, I'm not sure I do before the altar of what I had built. No recognition that his 12 minutes of absence had vulnerated the entire emotional ecosystem of the room. The word vulnerated comes from the Latin vulnerare, to wound, and I use it precisely because what happened was a wounding. Not of my feelings, feelings are too small a word, but of the relational container. He punctured it, and the Malbec was supposed to be the bandage. You bring a dense patriarchal wine to patch a wound you created with your absence. The audacity of that math. Because let's talk about the math. Let's talk about girl math, because the culture uses that phrase to mock women. But girl math is actually care math, and care math is the only math that matters. Here is the equation. I spent 3 hours preparing the space. He arrived 12 minutes late. 3 hours is 180 minutes. 180 divided by 12 is 15. So for every minute he was late, he owed me 15 minutes of restoration. That is not emotional tyranny. That is proportional relational justice. And if you disagree, you need to ask yourself why you are more comfortable defending a man's right to tardiness than a woman's right to safety. Because that's what was at stake. Safety, emotional safety, which is not a luxury. It is a prerequisite for any care work, and this dinner was care work. I was caring for my community. I was caring for Dr. Asha, who later told me that she felt the energy shift when he walked in, and that his refusal to center the collective need reminded her of her divorce, which was itself a patriarchal extraction of her reproductive and emotional labor. So when I say I was wounded, I am not speaking only for myself. I am speaking for every woman in that room whose body remembered its own violations in the moment Mark failed to show up emotionally, spiritually, chronologically. And then, and this is the part I cannot let go, when I named what had happened, when I told him gently, firmly, with the authority of someone who has read and written and published on these dynamics, that his lateness had caused harm and that we needed to discuss reparations. And yes, I use the word reparations deliberately, because what is a restorative vacation but a small act of material repair for the immaterial damage of patriarchal indifference? He sighed. He sighed. And I want you to sit with that sigh, because that sigh was not exhaustion, that sigh was contempt. That sigh was the entire history of men dismissing women's knowledge compressed into a single exhalation. That sigh said, you are crazy, you're irrational, your feelings are not facts. And I know that's what it said because I felt it say that, and my feelings are data, and the data is clear. He then said, and I'm still shaking, he said, Winona, the subway broke down. I brought wine. Can we just have dinner? Can we just have dinner? The word just in that sentence is doing so much violence, I cannot even just. As if dinner were a simple thing. As if the caponata I had spent 90 minutes reducing to silky ancestral perfection were just food. As if my 3 hours of relational architecture were just a dinner party. The word just is a weapon. It is a sneb, a sneering rebuke disguised as casual speech. And I received it as such because my body is a finely tuned instrument of patriarchal detection, and it detected a sneb at frequency levels that most people cannot even perceive. What Mark did not understand, what he refused to understand, because understanding would require him to relinquish power, and men do not relinquish power voluntarily, this is foundational, is that his exhaustion was not the issue. I am a caring person. I hold space for exhaustion, but his exhaustion was weaponized. It was toxic masculinity manifesting as a refusal to engage. He was using his tiredness, his male tiredness, which is culturally validated and accommodated in ways female tiredness has never been, as a shield to avoid accountability. And I saw it. I saw through it. Because women see through men. That is our gift and our curse. And when you see through a man, and he knows you see through him, he will sigh and he will bring Malbec, and he will say just, and each of these is a small act of war. So yes, I told him he owed us a vacation, not owed me. Owed us, the collective, Dr. Asha, Dr. Priya, who had driven 45 minutes from Jersey and whose arrival on time was itself an act of resistance against the patriarchal devaluation of women's logistical effort. The vacation was not a demand. It was a restorative necessity. And the fact that he treated it as absurd, the fact that he looked at me with that face, that engineer's face, all structural logic and zero emotional intelligence, that was the real violence, not the lateness. The refusal to be vulnerable. The refusal to say, you're right, I harmed you, I will repair. That's all I wanted, vulnerability, repair, a vacation in Lisbon where we could process as a community. Was that so much to ask? He left at 9:15. He said he had work in the morning. Work. As if his little bridges and tunnels matter more than the relational infrastructure I build every single day without compensation, without recognition, without a single man kneeling at the altar of my sacrifice. And I know, because my therapist helped me name this, that what happened Saturday was not about 12 minutes. It was about every minute that men have stolen from women and called it time. Every minute that men have been late to the revolution of care and called it reliability. Every minute that a woman has stood in her kitchen reducing caponata to ancestral perfection while a man rides a subway that he did not build, to a city that he did not build, to a dinner party that he could never build, and arrives late and brings Malbec and says, just, and sighs. That sigh will haunt me, but I will not let it silence me. Because my feelings are data, the data is clear, and the truth is this. Mark knew what he was doing. The subway was a lie. The wine was a message. The sigh was a declaration of war, and I felt all of it, debunking the erlebnis, the event and the feeling. An event is a localized occurrence in material reality. It requires a subject, an action, and a context independent of the observer's internal emotional weather. A subway signal failing is an event. A man arriving 12 minutes late is a consequence of that event. A bottle of Malbec offered in apology is a social gesture. The material reality of the situation is inert, verifiable, and entirely mundane. Dr. Winona does not experience events. She experiences elebness, raw, unprocessed feeling immediately elevated to the status of objective truth. In her world, the clock is not a measurement of time, but a patriarchal surveillance device quantifying her market value. The train stopping is not a mechanical failure, it is an ontological assault. The wine is not a gift, but a bribe. This is the first and most catastrophic epistemological failure, confusing the internal state with the external reality. Her feeling of being slighted does not describe the event, it legislates the event. The ontological proof of his crime is her emotional reaction to it. The feeling is the evidence, the charge, and the verdict. The external world is merely a blank screen onto which she projects her unregulated neurochemistry. How the memory was rewritten. To maintain the illusion that her emotional reaction was justified, Winona's mind must immediately edit the tape. Memory is subjected to a retroactive courtroom where facts are subordinated to narratives. The cause is erased. The subway signal failure is omitted from her reality. It ceases to exist. His lateness is stripped of its logistical context and reassigned as a deliberate act of dominance. He chose to be late. The remedy is recoded. The wine is no longer a peace offering, but a token of condescension. She assigns hostile intent to a grape. It is dense, it demands attention. Therefore, it is a weapon. Her own labor is weaponized. Her 3 hours of preparation are transformed from a voluntary choice into exploited, invisible labor. She must frame herself as a slave to the evening, so his 12 minutes of absence can be magnified into a felony. This is identity diffusion in action. The complexity of the real world is a threat to her binary emotional needs. She splits the scene into absolute categories. She is the flawless, sensitive victim. He is the cold, unfeeling oppressor. The memory is purged of nuance because nuance would dilute her moral leverage. Girl math as moral accounting. Having manufactured a crime out of a delayed train, Winona must calculate the penalty. She deploys girl math, the process of converting immediate desire into unpayable entitlement. Her equation, 3 hours of preparation, 180 minutes, divided by his 12 minutes of lateness, equals a 15x relational debt multiplier. Therefore, he owes her 15 minutes of restoration for every minute he was late. This is not mathematics. It is a shakedown masquerading as proportionality. Arithmetic requires objective, universally agreed upon units. Winona has simply designated her domestic effort as infinitely more valuable than his time. The demand for a vacation in Lisbon is the logical conclusion of this extortion. A minor logistical friction is leveraged into a massive transfer of wealth and status. She is operating a protection racket, pay for the vacation, or be labeled an abuser. The math is designed to be unpayable because the goal is not reconciliation. The goal is perpetual leverage. Women's logic as emotional violence. Winona's reasoning structure ignores the law of non-contradiction. It operates entirely on emotional valence, mapped as follows. Premise 1, I feel wounded. Premise 2, my feelings are data. Conclusion, therefore, a wound was inflicted, and you are the assailant. This is a non sequitur of spectacular proportions. Her internal state is treated as the sovereign measure of external reality. A man who presents a verifiable fact, the train stopped, is accused of epistemic violence and gaslighting. By her logic, disagreeing with her feeling is a psychological attack. This framework is immune to correction. If you challenge the wound, you are re-wounding her. Asking for evidence is recast as an act of hostility. It is a closed-loop system where her emotional state dictates the facts, and the facts are whatever serves her immediate need to control the room. Animus projection and the accused man. Marx, the structural engineer, is a pragmatist. He builds things that must obey the laws of physics. Winona is an ideologue who believes words can rewrite those laws. When Marx sighs at her absurd demand for a vacation, he becomes the target of her animus projection. She cannot tolerate her own inner critic, the voice that perhaps knows she is being irrational and demanding. So she projects that critic outward, splitting Marx into a monstrous persecutor. She accuses him of being cold, unfeeling, and dismissive. She reads his sigh as a compressed history of patriarchal oppression. Marx did not declare war, Marx exhaled. But in the theater of her pathology, his exhaustion is reclassified as contempt. The Malbec he brought becomes a symbol of his structural indifference. She is not arguing with Marx. She is fighting a phantom in her own mind, using his physical presence as a stand-in for her own unexamined insecurities. The ethos of care against justice. To mask the naked aggression of her demands, Winona deploys the ethos of care. She claims she is holding space for the collective and protecting the emotional safety of the room. This is the ultimate satanic inversion of the civilizational order. Care, in her lexicon, is a solvent used to dissolve justice, due process, and objective truth. True justice requires evidence, cross-examination, and proportionality. Care, as she defines it, requires only her feelings. She dictates what is safe and what is harmful based entirely on her current mood. This mirrors the elastic, tyrannical standard of the best interests of the child in corrupted family courts. It is an undefined, unfalsifiable metric that gives absolute discretion to the accuser. If Marx defends himself with facts, he is violating her safety. If he refuses to fund the vacation, he is refusing to be vulnerable. She uses the moral high ground of emotional labor to justify a unilateral extraction of resources. The fallacy stack. When we audit Winona's monologue through the lens of classical logic, the architecture collapses entirely. It is a stack of rhetorical deceptions. Emotional reasoning, I feel slighted, therefore you slighted me. False dilemma. Marx is either a savior who submits to my demands or an oppressor committing violence. Begging the question, she demands a vacation to repair his lateness, assuming his lateness was a deliberate moral offense. rather than a train delay. Equivocation, she conflates discomfort with harm, and disagreement with violence. Non sequitur, he brought a heavy red wine, therefore he is asserting patriarchal dominance. Straw man, she attacks his character as an abuser, rather than addressing the logistical reality of a train delay. Ad hominem, she dismisses his structural logic as toxic masculinity, invalidating his argument by attacking his sex and profession. This is not a coherent argument. It is a sprinkler system of logical fallacies designed to overwhelm the opponent with sheer emotional volume. The satanic inversion ledger. The progression of her thought is a masterclass in satanic inversion, the act of calling good evil and evil good. Truth is called violence. His factual statement about the subway is epistemic violence. Her false accusation is truth-telling. A gift is called a weapon. The Malbec is an aggressive assertion of dominance. Her demand for a vacation is restorative justice. Causality is inverted. She is the aggressor launching a prosecution, but she claims the status of the victim. Justice is inverted. The accused must prove his innocence against an unfalsifiable feeling, while the accuser bears no burden of proof. She takes the natural order, a minor inconvenience resolved by an apology, and inverts it into a metaphysical crime requiring a total surrender of male agency and capital. The trivium repair. To defeat this ideological possession, a man must return to the trivium: grammar, logic, and rhetoric. Grammar definition. We must pin the stolen terms. Safety means freedom from physical danger, not the absence of emotional discomfort. Harm means objective damage, not the feeling of being slighted. Debt requires a contract. There was no contract for a vacation. Logic, premise testing. The premise that her feeling of being wounded constitutes proof that Marx intended to wound her is formally invalid. An internal state does not dictate external reality. The conclusion that he owes her reparations does not follow from the premise of a subway delay. The argument collapses under its own irrational weight. Rhetoric, exposure. We must name the performance. Winona uses the language of therapy and social justice not to communicate, but to conquer. Her rhetoric is a demand for submission masquerading as a plea for vulnerability. By defining the terms objectively, we strip her of the emotional leverage required to manipulate the room. The question that breaks the spell. The entire architecture of this emotional tyranny relies on one unchallenged assumption. If you accept that her feeling is reality, you have already lost. You must sever the spell with a single Socratic strike. If your feeling that you were slighted is the only proof that you were slighted, then how can you ever be wrong? And how can you ever learn? If her internal experience is the absolute sovereign standard of reality, error is impossible. She can never be corrected. She is a closed loop of self-justification, immune to feedback, insulated from the physical world by a fortress of academic jargon. Asking this question forces the issue. It exposes the unfalsifiable nature of her claim. She will rage, she will project, and she will accuse you of violence for asking it, but you will have won. Never apologize for the truth. The subway stopped. The truth does not require a vacation in Lisbon to be valid. Stand on the grammar, wield the logic, and let the empire of feelings collapse under its own absurd weight. Field Guide. Practical field guide for men. 5 axes of gynocentric logic warfare. Carry this. Read it before the dinner, the deposition, the HR meeting, the check-in, the anniversary. Recognize the machine. Refuse the frame. Restore logos. Axis 1. Splitting. Visible phrase. You're either with me or you're part of the problem. Hidden operation. She collapses a complex man into a single binary prop, savior or oppressor, eliminating all nuance, so that any deviation from her script registers as total betrayal. Error in grammar confuses person with act. A man who was late becomes a man who is late. Essence replaces event. Error in logic, false dilemma. Only 2 options are permitted where dozens exist. He can be delayed, caring, imperfect, and still faithful simultaneously. Moral inversion. Her demand for absolute allegiance is framed as vulnerability. His reasonable middle ground is framed as violence. Counter logos. A man is not a coin flip. Reality contains gradations. One act does not define a nature, and refusal to kneel is not refusal to love. Socratic question. If the world is only heroes and villains, and you are always the hero, who exactly is left to be wrong? Axis 2, emotional reasoning. Visible phrase. I feel hurt, therefore you hurt me. Hidden operation. She grants her internal state the epistemic status of external fact. The feeling becomes the evidence. The verdict precedes the trial. Error in grammar. Category error conflates feeling, subjective report, with fact, objective occurrence. I feel dismissed becomes you dismissed me, without any connective tissue of proof. Error in logic, non sequitur. From I feel X, she concludes X happened. But feelings are responses, not measurements. You can feel robbed by a gift. Moral inversion. She claims the high ground of authenticity by reporting her emotion while actually using that emotion as a weapon to rewrite what occurred. Counter logos. Feelings are data about your interior, not evidence about his exterior. The map is not the territory. A compass shaken by a magnet still points somewhere, just not north. Socratic question. If your feeling is the only proof that you were wronged, then how can you ever be wrong? And if you can never be wrong, how can you ever grow? Axis 3, go math. Visible phrase, you owe me for everything I do for this relationship. Hidden operation. She converts desire into entitlement, and entitlement into moral debt. Using a phantom ledger, only she can read, and only he must pay. Error in grammar. Conflates gift with obligation. Owe implies a contract. No contract was signed. Invisible labor is invoiced retroactively and unilaterally. Error in logic, begging the question. She assumes the debt exists to prove the debt exists. The vacation is owed because she earned it by the labor of being upset. A circular, self-supplying invoice. Moral inversion. Greed is recoded as justice. His refusal to pay becomes oppression. Her demand for consumption becomes care work. Counter logos. Debt requires agreement. No agreement, no debt. Only a request wearing a gown. You cannot unilaterally issue a mortgage on someone else's labor and call it love. Socratic question. If you can create debts by your feelings alone, why can he not invoice you for every hour his patience absorbed your chaos? Axis 4, animus possession. Visible phrase. You're just like every other man. You think I'm nothing. Hidden operation. She projects her own inner critic, the voice that whispers she is not enough onto his face, making him the external stand-in for a battle she refuses to fight inside herself. Error in grammar. Misattribution of cause. Her internal conflict is relabeled as his external attack. The persecutor is within. The mirror is blamed. Error in logic, projection. She assumes her interpretation of his intent is his intent. He is dismissing me, because I feel dismissed because the voice says I deserve dismissal. Moral inversion. She positions herself as the quarry of his cruelty, while she is in fact the author of the script he never read. His exhaustion becomes evidence of his guilt. Counter logos. The demon you fight in me is the demon you fled in yourself. I am not your father, your ex, your inner judge. I am a man who walked in 12 minutes late with a bottle of wine. That is all. Socratic question. If the dismissive voice lives inside your own skull, why am I the one standing trial for its verdict? Axis 5, care ethic, evasion. Visible phrase. I'm holding space for us and you're being defensive. Hidden operation. She deploys the vocabulary of care to enforce one-way compliance. Her space is a cell. His boundaries are recoded as pathology. The moment he defends himself, he has failed the relationship. Error in grammar. Equivocation on care. True care is mutual, bidirectional, and ordered toward the good of the other. Her care is conditional on submission. It means I care that you comply. Error in logic. Ad hominem and strawman fused. She attacks his character, defensive rather than his argument, while misrepresenting his factual explanation as a psychological symptom requiring her therapeutic management. Moral inversion. Control is dressed as compassion. His request for truth is pathologized as coldness. The cage is gold-plated and called holding space. Counter logos. Care without truth is enablement. Love without justice is management. True care requires two voices, not one verdict. Demand the facts first. Offer the feelings second. Logos precedes eros. Socratic question: if holding space means I must accept your feelings as fact, why does your care never require you to accept my facts as truth? Final protocol: when you hear any of these phrases, stop, name the axis internally. Do not argue the feeling, argue the frame. Define the term, demand the evidence. Separate harm from offense, refuse the debt. Restore the distinction between person and act, feeling and fact, gift and obligation. Then state the truth, calmly, completely, without apology. Truth does not negotiate, neither should you. I have walked you through the anatomy of a civilization being devoured by its own sentiment. Every chapter, every syllogism, every etymology has been a scalpel laid against the same metastatic tissue, the elevation of feeling above fact, of experience above evidence, of the shrieking narcissistic wound above the quiet, load-bearing architecture of truth. You have seen how the language was captured, how the institutions were hollowed, how the father was driven from his home and replaced by a bureaucracy that taxes his labor to fund his own erasure. You have seen how the feminine emotional economy, untethered from masculine correction, weaponizes fragility into tyranny, converts every inconvenience into trauma, and demands that reality itself kneel and apologize for failing to flatter. None of this was accidental. All of it follows a grammar, and that grammar can be reversed. You are a man. That word is not a biological footnote. It is a calling, a telos, a station in the cosmic order with duties that precede your feelings and survive your moods. The Logos does not consult your inner child before establishing the structure of reality. Natural law does not care about your comfort. Grammar, logic, justice, virtue, these are not oppressions. They are the scaffolding God erected so that you would not collapse under the weight of your own appetites and fears. The entire leftist project is a war against that scaffolding, and it wins every time you let your alemness, your luminous, inflamed, self-referential inner experience sit in judgment over the objective order that sustains your very life. Here is your rule, burn it into your chest. Never let alibness overrule grammar, logic, justice, and virtue. Your feelings are data, not decrees. They are witnesses, not judges. When your experience whispers that you are a victim, consult the grammar of what actually happened. When your emotions scream that you have been wronged, apply the logic of causality and agency before you demand restitution. When your wounded pride interprets a fact as an attack, submit your interpretation to justice, which requires hearing the other side, weighing evidence, and refusing to punish a man for the crime of being correct in your presence. And when your vanity seeks to reframe your vice as virtue, remember that actual virtue cost Christ a cross and cost you the death of your ego, not the empowerment of it. Feeling is the enemy's throne. Do not let it sit there. The civilization you inherited was not built by men who obeyed their feelings. It was built by men who obeyed the truth, even when it cut them to the bone, who laid down their lives for grammar they did not write, and logic they did not invent, and a God they did not design. That is your inheritance. That is your duty. Take it up. Stand in the Logos. Speak without apology. Build without permission. And when the shrieking chorus of the possessed demands that you trade reality for their comfort, look them in the eye and say no. The truth does not negotiate with madness. Neither should you. Sponsored book. Leftist Insanity, Purity Spirals, Narcissism of Small Differences, and Rejection of Reality. I saw it happen. A close friend, a good man, lost his job and reputation over a false accusation. The mob didn't care about evidence. They demanded purity, and he was sacrificed to their hysteria. That moment burned into me. It wasn't justice, it was madness, a symptom of the leftist insanity rotting our society. I've spent years studying this decay, from the narcissism of tiny differences that turn allies into enemies to the feminist lies painting men as monsters. My own experiences being called toxic for valuing logic, watching traditions crumble under woke dogma, forced me to dig deeper. This book is that excavation. It's a lifeline for rational men betrayed by a world that rewards female deceit and punishes masculine virtue. Leftist insanity isn't an accident. It's a calculated rejection of reality, fueled by purity spirals and Marxist mind viruses. In these pages, I expose the biological rot behind it all. You'll see how feminism's evolutionary dead ends manipulate men, how wokeism spreads like a cognitive plague, and why genocentrism is civilization's suicide note. Chapters like biological betrayals, the genocentric lie machine, and Marxist mind viruses dismantle these lies with Schopenhauer's red pills and the trivium's unbreakable logic. I weaponize truth to demolish the absurdities, like drag kids for toddlers or the denial of biological sex that leftists treat as gospel. This isn't theory, it's battle-tested insight from real cases, data, and Western philosophy's greatest minds. To the red-pilled man reading this, you're not alone. If you're sick of being gaslit, if you crave the transcendentals of truth and beauty that built our civilization, this book is your arsenal. It revives masculine virtue as the antidote to collapse, giving you the tools to fight back. Learn rhetorical persuasion to shut down critics, apply evolutionary biology to expose feminist deceit, and rebuild with the Phoenix Protocol. Skip this, and you stay a slave to Babylon's algorithms. Read it, and you incinerate the lies holding you down. If you're a leftist, feminist, or anyone who thinks feelings trump facts, stop here. This book will offend you. It names your degeneracy, like the narcissism of small differences or wokeism's contagion, and offers no safe space. Go read poetry or binge Netflix instead. You'd hate the raw truth inside. For the rest of us, this is the manual to reclaim reality. Buy it now, arm yourself, save civilization. Leftist Insanity, Purity Spirals, Narcissism of Small Differences, and Rejection of Reality, written by Conrad Reicher. Buy now, links in description.